Hi! Welcome to this part of my review featuring the alien role-playing game called Rulebook. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review featuring this horror sci-fi experience, please check out the playlist in the description below. In this part of the review, we are going to take a look at damage, stress and panic, conditions and hazards. Let's start with damage. You run the risk of being injured in combat. Everything from exhaustion to bleeding cuts and broken bones is summarized as damage. How much damage you can take is determined by your health score. When you are not injured, your total health score is equal to your strength. Talents can modify your maximum health total. Let's talk about broken. If you drop to 0 health, you are broken. In effect, taken out of the action. Immediately roll for a critical injury. If you are not dead, you can crawl and mumble through the pain. You can't perform any other actions, and you can't roll for any skills. You can't go below 0 health, but each further attack that causes damage will give you another critical injury. Now concerning armor, this keeps you safe from harm, of course. The effectiveness of a piece of armor is represented by its armor rating. You can only wear one suit of armor at a time. When you take damage from an attack, you roll a number of base dice equal to your armor rating. Each 6 that you roll lowers the damage inflicted by 1 point. The armor roll does not count as an action for you. Concerning recovery, when you are no longer broken, you can recover 1 point of lost health per turn of rest. Critical injuries can still affect you after all of your health is restored, however. Now let's talk about getting back up. Being broken is not fatal in itself. Only critical injuries can actually kill you. There are 2 ways to get back up after being broken, assuming you're not dead, of course. There's first aid. Someone can help you back onto your feet by administering first aid to you using the medical aid skill. This is a slow action. Certain medical equipment can give bonuses to the roll. If the roll is successful, you get back up immediately, regaining health equal to the number of 6s in the skill roll. Administering first aid to someone who isn't broken has no effect. It's important to note that if you are broken and no one is around to help you, you automatically recover 1 point of health after 1 turn has passed, and can then get back up on your own. There are also rules for the coup de grace. A broken character is defenseless. If it's a human being and you want to kill your target outright, you must fail an empathy roll, that is rolling for the attribute only, without stress dice. Whether or not you succeed at killing your target, you increase your stress level by 1. Killing in cold blood is not that easy. If you have the merciless talent, you can kill without this negative effect. When it comes to critical injuries, as long as you still have health left, damage points represent fatigue, bruises or smaller cuts. Painful to be sure, but possible to overcome. Critical injuries represent a much more dangerous form of injury. This can maim or kill you. When knocked down to 0 health, you roll a d66, that is 1 die counting as 1s, the other one as 10s, on the critical injury table. NPCs can also be broken in the same way as player characters. An NPC can administer first aid to a player character and vice versa. However, dice are usually not rolled when an NPC aids another NPC. Instead, the Game Master decides what happens. The Game Master can also decide that a minor non-player character who is broken simply dies. Concerning death, if you suffer a critical injury listed as fatal, you must make a death roll when the listed time runs out. A death roll is a roll for stamina, but you cannot push the roll, and you are not allowed to roll any stress dice. If the death roll fails, you die. If you succeed, you linger on, but you must make another death roll when the listed amount of time has passed again. To save your life when you have suffered a fatal critical injury, someone must give you first aid before you fail a death roll. First aid, of course, is a slow action and requires a medical aid roll. Note that some critical injuries are so severe that a negative modification is applied to the medical aid roll. If you recover a health point by yourself before you fail a death roll, You can try to give yourself first aid, but you get a penalty to the roll. Each character who attempts to treat you can try only once. To get a second chance, better medical equipment is needed. If you are both broken and have sustained a fatal critical injury or several, 2 separate medical aid rolls are needed, one to get you back on your feet and another to save your life. These 2 rolls can be made in whichever order you prefer. Note that there are 4 critical injuries that kill you outright. If you roll any of these, your character immediately dies. No death roll is allowed. Let me read some of the results of the critical injuries table. You have stunned. This is not fatal. There are no effects, and you do not need time to heal this. But then there is concussion. This is not fatal, but it applies a penalty to mobility, and 1d6 days need to pass to heal this. There is also broken nose. This is also not fatal, but it applies a penalty to manipulation and observation. You also need to let 1d6 days to pass to heal this. But then we have punctured lung. You must treat this within 1 day. Stamina and mobility receive a penalty, and you need 1d6 days to heal this. You also have busted kidney. This is fatal. You need to treat this within 1 day. You can't run. You only crawl, and you get a penalty to mobility while you are injured with this. And you need to heal this in 2d6 days. And there are things such as a ruptured aorta, which is fatal and applies a penalty to your medical roll. You have 1 round to treat this. You get a penalty to stamina, and it will heal completely if you survive in 3d6 days. There are also other lethal results, such as crushed skull, which is instantaneous, your story ends here, and pierced head, which is also immediately fatal. And before we get into stress and trauma, let me read some of the permanent mental trauma results from the table. There is phobia. You are terrified by something related to what caused you to panic. The GM decides what it is. Your stress level increases by 1 when within short range of the object of your phobia. If you stay close to it for more than a single round, you make a panic roll. There is also drug use. You must use some form of recreational drug every shift, or your stress level increases by 1. You cannot relieve stress without consuming your drug of choice. When it comes to healing, each critical injury has a specific effect that you suffer during the healing time indicated, which is measured in days. If someone tends to you daily during the process of healing a critical injury or several and makes a medical aid roll, the remaining health time is reduced by half. Any earlier roll to save your life does not count towards this. A new roll is required to reduce the healing time. Note that you can recover all of your lost health points, but still suffer the effects of a critical injury. Now let's talk about stress and panic. The mounting tension in your character is measured by their stress level. It usually starts at 0 and increases during the course of the game. Your stress level increases by 1 whenever one of the following happens. Perhaps you push a skill roll. You fire a burst of full auto fire. You suffer 1 or more points of damage. You go without sleep, food or water, just to name a few of these circumstances. When it comes to gaining stress dice, whenever you make a skill roll, you must add a number of stress dice equal to your current stress level to your roll. Your stress makes you more focused, increasing your chance to succeed. There's a flip side to this though. If you roll 1 or more ones on your stress dice, you must make a panic roll. As long as you keep your stress in check, you can use it to your advantage. But if the tension grows too strong, it can explode, sending you into a wild panic. You need to make a panic roll when certain things happen. Maybe you roll 1 or more ones on your stress dice in a skill roll. If this happens, you can't push the skill roll. Instead, roll for panic. Maybe you witness a friendly character suffering from a certain panic effect. Or perhaps you are pinned down via ranged attack. You roll a d6 at your current stress level and you check a table to see what happens. Let's talk about panic actions first. If you roll a 10 or higher on your panic roll, you will be forced to perform a specific action. If the panic roll was the result of a skill check for an action, the action is cancelled and immediately replaced by the forced panic action, even if you roll a 6. Let's talk about some of these panic roll effects. Maybe you rolled a 7 on the table. That would get you a nervous twitch. Your stress level and the stress level of all friendly player characters in short range of you increases by 1. Maybe you roll a 9. It results in drop item. Whether by stress, confusion, or the realization that you're all going to die anyway, you drop a weapon or other important item. The GM decides which one. Your stress level increases by 1. Or maybe you get a result of Berserk on the table. You must immediately attack the nearest person or creature, friendly or not. You won't stop until you or the target is broken. Every friendly character who witnesses your rampage must make an immediate panic roll. So as you can see, panic is quite contagious. If you are suffering from a panic effect and are forced to make another panic roll, the new panic effect replaces the previous one. If the new roll is lower than the previous effect, however, it is automatically adjusted to 1 step more severe than the previous effect. The Overkill talent lets you replace the effect of a panic roll result of 11 or higher by the Overkill effect, if you have any enemies in sight. When triggering Overkill, you must immediately attack your enemies and you won't stop until you or all enemies in sight are broken. Also, all other player characters in short range of you must make an immediate panic roll. Now, how to stop panic? Some effects on the panic roll table are immediate or last 1 round. Others remain in effect until one of the following happens. Another character comes to your aid and makes a command roll. This counts as a slow action in combat. Maybe you are broken, or maybe 1 turn passes. When it comes to relieving stress, for every turn spent resting in a safe area that is secured from enemies, that is between 5 to 10 minutes, your stress level is reduced by 1 point. You cannot make any skill rolls while resting, and if your rest is interrupted, it doesn't count. A panic roll can also decrease stress, as can certain drugs. Once per act in cinematic play, and once per game session in campaign play, you can interact with your signature item in some way to reduce your stress level 1 step. This typically requires a slow action. Some conditions, such as starving or freezing, can block your ability to relieve stress. When it comes to permanent mental trauma, if you have rolled a result of 13 or higher on a panic roll during a game session, you must make an empathy roll after the session. You roll for the attribute only, not using any skill. If the roll succeeds, you develop a permanent mental trauma of some kind. You roll a d6 and consult the table of the results that I just talked about. Now, when it comes to NPCs and panic, stress levels are only tracked for player characters, never for NPCs. And NPCs never make panic rolls. Instead, non-player characters panic when the GM deems it appropriate. Panicking non-player characters can increase the stress level of player characters nearby. This is up to the GM's judgment. Now let's talk about hazards. I will give you a few examples because each hazard in this role-playing game is handled separately. You have things such as dehydrated. After a day without sufficient water, you become dehydrated. Being dehydrated has several effects. You cannot recover health or relieve stress. Every shift, you suffer 1 point of damage and your stress level increases 1 step. If you are broken while dehydrated, you must make a death roll after every shift without liquid. Medical aid has no effect against these death rolls. You need fluids to save yourself. As soon as you drink, the above effects wear off within 1 shift. Maybe you get exhausted. You need to sleep for at least 1 shift each day. After 1 day without sufficient sleep, you become exhausted. Being exhausted has several effects. You cannot relieve stress. You must make a stamina roll each day. The GM decides when, with a negative modification equal to the number of days spent without decent sleep. If the roll fails, you collapse and sleep for 1 shift. As soon as you have slept for at least 1 shift, you are no longer exhausted. So you have all of the details and rules for different conditions and hazards here, such as starvation, vacuum, that is what happens when you are exposed to a vacuum, even explosive decompression. There's also freezing, falling, explosions, fire, disease, radiation, drowning, suffocation, synthetics. Let's talk about that because it's interesting. Synthetic individuals are increasingly common in the core systems and appear on the frontier as well. Some are open about their artificial nature, others pose as humans. In combat, androids act like humans, and they roll skill rolls normally, but there are several differences. When it comes to attributes, synthetics generally have higher attribute scores than humans. Concerning skills and stress, androids can't push skill rolls, they don't suffer stress, don't have a stress level, and they never make panic rolls. When it comes to damage, if a synthetic is broken, roll for a critical injury on the table for synthetics. Until the android suffers a system shutdown, it can continue to operate, only suffering the effects of the critical injury. This makes androids very hard to stop. Each further attack inflicting damage on a broken android will inflict another critical injury. If you roll the same critical injury again, shift it down one step on the table. So maybe you have the result of ruptured fluid pump. The android loses its next slow action. Maybe you have destroyed arm servos. One arm is non-functional. The android can only use one-handed gear. Or maybe there is a severe chassis breach. Internal organs spill out and the android is completely immobilized. When it comes to repairs, androids don't heal. Instead, a shift of work and a Comtech roll is required to repair all lost health points and all critical injuries. As long as the android hasn't suffered a system shutdown, they can repair themselves. When it comes to death, androids don't make death rolls and cannot die. If they suffer a system shutdown, they can be reactivated to communicate with. This requires a power source, a turn of work, and a Comtech roll. An android revived in this way can be repaired to working order, but it will suffer a permanent mental trauma. When it comes to resources, synthetics don't need air, food, water, or sleep. They are immune to vacuum, cold, and disease. Androids are typically unaffected by alien pathogens. And lastly, let's talk about xenomorphs. You've heard the stories about the monsters out there. You better hope that you won't need to face one yourself. Fighting xenomorph beings is something different entirely, and far more deadly than facing humans or even androids. Very few have lived to tell the tale. Although there are other details concerning xenomorphs in other chapters of this book, in this section you have information on combat when it comes to xenomorphs participating in battle. Xenomorphs have multiple actions. Some xenomorphs get to act twice or even 3 times in a round. For such creatures, the GM draws a number of initiative cards equal to their speed rating. At the time of each initiative, the xenomorph gets to perform one fast and one slow action. Concerning signature attacks, most xenomorphs attack only in close combat at engaged range. Each time a xenomorph attacks, the GM rolls a d6, consults a table for the creature's signature attack, and resolves the effects. Some signature attacks are extremely deadly. When it comes to health, when a xenomorph is reduced to 0 health, it isn't broken in the way a human is. Instead, the GM rolls a d6 on a special critical injury table. When it comes to armor rating, most xenomorphs have a thick hide, resistant to attacks, giving them a natural armor rating. Concerning special abilities, some xenomorphs have special actions beyond the signature attacks. This is specified under each xenomorph description. And this concludes this part of the review. As you can see, things are handled cinematic and gritty at the same time. So no matter the mode of play that you run, there will be moments of glory and defeat. But I think there is a constant sense or fear of getting killed or injured in some way. And so it should. That's what makes Alien so special, be it in comic books, in video games, in movies. You always have that lingering fear that something terrible is about to happen, and this Alien tabletop role-playing game is no exception. There is a lot of granularity when it comes to the results, many nuances concerning specific cases, be it the injuries that you suffer, the stress and panic results, and even the hazards feel as fun little subsystems on their own. And of course you can see the deadliness of the xenomorphs. But most of all, I like how each separate case still ties together into a cohesive system. Thank you for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. In the next part we are going to talk about vehicle combat rules and gear, items, weapons, and different vehicle types. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.